I was on a call this week and a student was selling a flip and he asked, how would I know if the loan is good before accepting an offer? What questions should I be asking my agent? And this is a great question because if you are going to sell a flip and you accept an offer and it ultimately falls through because of financing, it can kill your holding costs, waste you a ton of time and money, and it's going to force you to take your home back to the market, which always comes with a certain stigma with future buyers. And so you may never get that original list price again if you have to do that. So you want to do everything possible to avoid that happening. So I'm going to give you my 5-step process that can help you minimize the chance that a deal is falling through due to financing. Who am I? My name is Ryan Rice. I'm a full-time real estate investor. I've sold over 50 of my own houses and have plenty of lender experience with all sorts of different types of loans. And so this 5-step process is exactly what I do when I'm selling a home. And it's either me or my agent is doing it, depending on if I'm selling it or if I'm hiring an agent to sell it. So let's get into it. You go through all the work of renovating your home. You've put your blood, sweat, tears, and money, time, and you put it on the market and you get an offer. Make sure that you do these 5 things before you accept any offers. The first thing you're going to do, step 1, look at the financing type. There are different levels of strength in financing, and I'm going to give you my opinion of the order of strength of the different types of financing that they are. If you get a cash offer, that's the strongest type of financing. It requires no appraisals. It requires no underwriting. There's no, loan requirements due to the fact that there is no loan. They simply bring their cash and they purchase the home. That's the strongest. Next is conventional, either 20% to 25% down conventional loans. The reason why that's the strongest form of financing is because that is the type of financing that requires the least amount of underwriting. When I say the least amount of underwriting, what I mean is that is the loan where your down payment is the highest, which means the loan is going to be the smallest, which means there can be lower underwriting requirements. Next is a conventional loan that's anything less than 20%. Any sort of conventional loan is the strongest loan product. If it's less than 20% down, there are still conventional products out there, but again, because the loan is going to be higher as a percentage relative to the purchase price because the down payment is less, that means there's going to be more underwriting requirements. The homeowner is going to have to make more money to satisfy the debt that they're going to have to incur when they purchase the home. Next is an FHA loan. FHA is a loan where a buyer puts usually about 3.5% down. And there are also some very stringent appraisal requirements when it comes to FHA. And for that reason, it's a little bit lower on the list. But I've closed plenty of FHA type of loans. It can be a fine product. Now, real quick to mention on FHA, if you're flipping, there's what's called a 90-day rule on FHA. It means if you have bought a property and you go to try to sell it within 90 days, and it's 90 days from when the offer is submitted, not 90 days from when that loan is going to close. And so if you bought a home on January 1st, 90 days from January 1st is April 1st. If it is March 30th and the offer is dated March 30th and they go to offer on an FHA loan, that FHA lender will not accept that offer because you're within that 90-day period. So something to keep in mind. You're going to have to wait until 90 days after you purchased it to go in contract if it's an FHA loan. And then another FHA rule is if you're going to sell the house twice what you purchased it for, then the FHA underwriter is going to require 2 appraisals. And both of those appraisals have to come back at the same price. And if one is lower, then the bank is going to go with a lower appraisal as opposed to the higher. So that means if you buy a $100,000 house and you go to flip it and you list it for $200,000, then and you're accepting an FHA offer, that FHA lender is going to have to do 2 appraisals on the house, and both of those appraisals are going to have to meet the purchase price, or you may have to take a reduction. So just something to keep in mind as it relates to FHA. And then a couple other types of loan products. There's a VA loan product, which is a veteran or an active military type loan product. That can be a strong product. I personally haven't received a lot of VA type of offers. From what I've heard, though, they can take a little bit longer to close. And then I'm in the state of Virginia. There's what's called a VHDA loan, and that's just a loan for first-time home buyers. Those loans typically take a little bit longer to close, and the underwriting might be a little bit different because there might be options where the buyer doesn't have to put any money down or very little money down. So again, those underwriting requirements are going to be a little bit different. If you're not in the state of Virginia, it's likely, I would assume that your state also has some sort of similar loan program. And so talk to your agent or do some research before accepting, some sort of financing type that you're not clear on what exactly it is. And then lowest on my list, there's what's called an ITIN loan. ITIN stands for Individual Tax Identification Number. And that loan product is for people who don't have social security numbers but still can get financing to buy a home. Now, what's tricky about an ITIN loan is when I received an offer with an ITIN loan, it was presented to me as a conventional offer. And so you may not know if it's an ITIN loan, but I will tell you my experience with ITIN was very poor. The closing date got extended about 3 times. It was presented to me as I think it was a 35-day close, and it ended up closing closer to 50 to 60 days. I don't recall which. And there wasn't a lot of great communication or a lot of significant confidence portrayed that the loan would actually close. So the only way I know to identify if it is an ITIN loan is to simply call and ask the lender. And we'll get to that in one of the other steps. But you could always consider just asking the lender directly, if it says conventional, is this an ITIN loan? And I don't really know the laws as far as what a lender has the ability to tell you or if it's unlawful to tell you. But what I know is I didn't know that it was an ITIN loan, and the experience was very poor. And then everything I just went through is for an owner-occupant. I have sold homes before and even flips, and a non-owner occupant wants to buy the house with financing. And the most common loan that I've dealt with there is what's called a DSCR loan, debt service coverage ratio. And knowing that it's a DSCR loan is important because when you go on to steps 2 and 3 that I'm about to give you, you're going to communicate a little bit differently with that lender to confirm that the lender has the proper information so that deal doesn't fall through later on. So those are the different types of financing. And I think it's important as part of step 1, when you receive that offer, that you understand what the different types of financing are and the pros and cons to each, and to understand the relative strength of the offer as it correlates to what type of financing was presented. Step 2 is you're going to review the pre-approval. Never just accept an offer without any sort of pre-approval letter. Most good buying agents, when they submit an offer, they're going to submit an offer with a pre-approval. But the pre-approval is a very, very important part of the process, and it's important that you review it. And your agent should be doing this for you, but I'm going to communicate to you as the seller because ultimately you're accountable for selling your own house. But your agent should be, this is an expectation that you should have of your agent. If they're good, they should do these steps for you. So what are you looking for when you review this pre-approval? Well, there's what's called pre-qualification letters, and there's what's called pre-approval letters. Pre-qualification, if it were me personally, I wouldn't even consider those. Because what pre-qualification typically means is that a buyer has told a lender verbally, I make this much money, here are the assets that I have, this is my credit, and then a lender is going to give a buyer a letter saying, well, because of what you told me, you qualify for this amount. But there's not any sort of confirmation of what the buyer has said. And as you and I know, a buyer can say whatever it is that they want. And so what I would suggest is if you are receiving a pre-qualification letter, I would strongly consider not accepting with just a pre-qual, and to call the lender and say, hey, have you validated this information? Because it's a pre-qual, they're probably going to tell you no. And then you could give instruction, hey, before I accept this offer, can you go validate that this information is accurate? And then the lender can send you an updated pre-approval as opposed to a pre-qualification. And that's going to be much stronger because then the lender has confirmed that the information that the buyer has given the lender verbally is accurate. And then when you do get a pre-approval, okay, what am I looking at in the actual pre-approval? Well, what I have noticed is lenders get really creative with the wording of their pre-approval. And they do this because the pre-approval, obviously every loan officer that is funding a loan, they want the loan to close. That's how they make money, right? And so they're going to word this pre-approval that is going to increase the probability that a seller accepts the offer. And some of the wording can be really tricky. And what I've noticed is when I am reading these pre-approvals, some of them are very, very clear because the lender is on top of it. The lender knows what they're doing and they communicate very clearly in their pre-approval the steps that have been taken. But some lenders seem to not want to take as many steps beforehand and just word a pre-approval ever so gently to avoid having to take those steps and then do further underwriting after a deal is accepted. Well, what I found is that anytime a pre-approval says anything other than, this is the lender in the pre-approval, the lender saying, I have manually validated the credit and the income from the buyer. Anytime there's any other wording other than something like that, then I'm going to seek clarity on what steps were taken to confirm the information. Because again, every lender is a little bit different. And if it's a lender with less experience or not as good, they might word their pre-approval in such a way that is persuasive to a seller to accept the offer, but they haven't done the proper steps. And if those proper steps are done later after an offer is accepted, and they find out at that time that the information is inaccurate, well, it could completely blow up your deal. So if you're reading a pre-approval and that wording just doesn't feel right, or it makes you ask, what does that mean? Pick up the phone and get clarity on exactly what that means, because you don't want to understand what that means later when it becomes a problem. Step 3, your agent is going to pick up the phone and call the lender. And a lot of brand new agents may not understand this part of the process, but if it's an experienced agent, you're going to notice that they're going to do this for you. But if you're hiring an agent that's inexperienced, it's important that you know what that agent should be doing. So the agent's going to pick up the phone and they're just going to call the lender and get verbal confirmation from the lender. Hey, I see the pre-approval just says this. I just wanted to confirm you validated the income, you validated the credit, you've confirmed that the assets, everything is good to go. And the lender can then communicate to you, what's going on with the file. And you can usually tell when the lender is communicating to you with what sense of confidence that they have, or they'll tell you what steps that they've taken to validate and confirm the income and the credit. And this is when, if the pre-approval had some suspect wording or just wasn't super clear, you can ask them, hey, I wasn't super clear on your pre-approval. Can you tell me what specific steps that you've taken to validate the income and the credit? And you want the lender to be able to very clearly communicate to you that they have personally and manually audited the income and the credit, because you don't want that process again to happen later and it blow up your deal. Now, I mentioned earlier, one of the loan options for a non-owner occupant loan is what's called a DSCR. When you call a DSCR lender, the questions that you're asking are a little bit different, because a DSCR lender is not loaning based on personal credit, personal assets, and personal income. A DSCR lender is lending on future rental income and how much the loan is going to cost, how much the debt is going to cost, and is there enough of a ratio between rental income and debt service that makes the lender feel comfortable. And usually most lenders are going to want to see a ratio of 1.25 to 1, rental to debt. And the debt that I'm talking about is just your principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. And if there's a 1.25 to 1 ratio, most DSCR lenders are going to feel comfortable with that loan. And every lender's got, the number could vary a little bit, but 1.25 is the most common number that I've seen. Now, most DSCR lenders are also going to require that the buyer show proof of any reserves, so that because that loan is going to require some sort of down payment in most cases. And so asking the lender if they have confirmed and validated the reserves could be a good step. But another thing you can confirm when you go to call a DSCR lender is you could ask them like, hey, I see you've written a pre-approval here. What rent are you basing, like what does this need to rent for in order for you to feel comfortable funding this loan at the current purchase price? Because at the current purchase price, they have a debt calculation. Where does this need to rent in order for you to feel comfortable? And then they're just going to tell you. And then what you can do is go to, Zillow Rent Estimate or Rentometer.com, type in the address and make sure that, Rentometer says, hey, this property is going to rent for $1,500, and the DSCR lenders says, well, the property needs to rent for $2,000 a month for us to be able to fund it. Well, then that is a very large discrepancy, and you can talk to the lender and have a candid conversation about that up front. Because again, if the lender is planning on bringing in $2,000 of rental income, but that property will typically only rent for $1,500, then if that gets uncovered later on in the underwriting process, then it could completely blow up your deal, and you don't want that to happen. And so do some research, figure out what the property is most likely going to rent for by looking at Rentometer, Zillow Rent Estimate, which they just pull rental comps in the area, and then have a conversation with the DSCR lender about that to make sure that there's not some big discrepancy. Step 4 is your agent is going to check his or her network for any feedback on that lender. If it's an experienced agent and they've done, hundreds of deals, then it's likely that they've worked with that lender before, unless it's a newer lender, and then there's not going to be much feedback at all. But what I have found is working with a really, really experienced agent, we'll get an offer and everything looks fine on paper, but my agent has worked with that loan officer before and they were terrible, not communicative, very not responsive. And when we've received multiple offers and we have a loan officer who has performed poorly, and we compare that to another officer that a loan officer or another offer where the loan officer has performed really, really well, we're going to give more credence to the offer with the loan officer that has a good performance history. And so if your agent is new, your agent can ask your broker or your agent can ask their broker, hey, have you heard of this lender? Do you have any experience with them? Your agent can reach out to a peer who's done a whole bunch of deals and ask, but understanding the reputation that this loan officer or this lender has is important because I have come across scenarios where an agent has, seen an offer with a certain lender and the agent just had an experience with that lender, went through a whole 30 days and then couldn't close the deal because there was some sort of underwriting issue at the very end. Well, that's a big deal, right? If I know that that's happened with that lender, that's going to sway my desire to want to accept that offer. And it's important you know that up front. So asking your agent to do some due diligence and check his or her network for feedback on the lender is a really good step that can help you avoid any future issues. And then step 5, and this is only going to apply if you have multiple offers. But if you get multiple offers, 2+ offers, and all of them have different terms, different types of financing, what's been really helpful for me is I make a spreadsheet, and in each column, I put all of the important information about each specific offer. And that way I have everything on one page and I can compare everything right in front of me. And so you put, the offer amount, the type of financing, how much the down payment is, how big the EMD is, what's the inspection period, what's the closing date, any of the pertinent information you put all on one page, and then you can compare it. Because what's going to happen, you might have, for example, let's say you're listing a house for $300,000. And let's say you get a conventional 20% 30-day close offer at list price $300,000, but you get a FHA 45-day close offer at $305,000. Well, you're going to want to see all of that information all on one page, and I might consider taking a conventional 25% down offer at 300 over an FHA 305 because the process is just going to be simpler, right? And it's going to be easier for you to make decisions if you can see all of the pertinent information on one page. So if you get multiple offers, if you have a good agent, they'll do this for you. They'll put it all on a spreadsheet so that you can compare. But again, if you have a less experienced agent and they don't do this for you, be sure that you take the time to do it so that you know that you're making a good decision by looking at all of the information on one page. And that's it. Those are the 5 steps. So step 1, you're going to look at the financing type. Step 2, review the pre-approval. Step 3, have your agent call the lender and have a good conversation. Step 4, your agent is going to check his or her network for any feedback on that lender. And then step 5, put all of your offers on one page so you can see and look at everything together. So hope that was helpful to you guys. I think it's really important to not accept an offer that has the potential to fall out due to financing. It's happened to me before. It's such a pain in the butt. And if listening to this 20 minutes can help you avoid that, then man, that's time well spent. So I hope you guys enjoyed that, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.